Welcome on this event from Product Community Greece. It's the third event this year. And as always, we'll go through a short introduction on our side, and then we will welcome today's speaker. So for those of you that are here for the first time, we are Product Community Greece. We have a dedicated website where you can find us, but also we have our LinkedIn page and our Meetup page where you can get our updates regarding our events. And a few words about us. Basically, our purpose is to bring together product people and, of course, share knowledge and best practices around the product craft. And our goal is to create a network where we can foster this interaction among product people in both Greece and abroad, of course. And today is a very good example of how we are expanding, and we welcome speakers from all around the world here. Basically, our actions include events that we do once or twice a month, it depends. So this includes our online webinars like today's webinar. And of course, we have interviews from product leaders so we can share best practices. And of course, we have content that we share on our blog and on our LinkedIn page on a daily basis, and of course, our newsletter. So you can keep an eye on those pages to get the latest news from our team. At this point, I would like to thank our sponsors. We have Orpheum and Learnworms. Thank you very much for our website and for our account here on Zoom, and for always supporting our needs, of course, and our marketing and communication sponsors. Thank you very much for that. And here is the team. It's me, Ioannis, it's Olga and Kaya, Kaya is product at Learnworlds. Olga works at Societal as a head of product and co-founder, and I work at Orpheum. And without further ado, please have your questions ready. We have Kamila today here to answer your questions, of course, present the ideas, but you can join at slido.com. You can have this code here, or you can scan the QR code, but we will also share the link on chat, so you can go there and pose your questions. You can write your questions, you can write your name if you want, and of course you can upvote all the other questions so that we can prioritize the questions here, so we know what's most interested for you. And without further ado, I would like to welcome Kamila here today. She's our senior product manager at Atlassian, and she will talk about how we can validate our ideas to the users. Kamila, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Yanis. So just let me share my screen, maybe?
Yes, of course.
Thanks. Okay, great. So I hope you see my screen. So have you ever created a solution that you were confident about and been proven wrong by the user? We did. So we researched some potential solutions and thought we knew what our customers would need. More precisely, we were spying 3 different solutions for connecting our on-prem with SaaS products. The first one, improving allow listing, was an improvement of the existing solution that we already had. The second one was a one-way uplink, which was a one-directional integrations for the different products. And the last one was an application tunnel, a bidirectional network tunnel. Based on the problem we were trying to solve, we thought that the one-way uplinks was a solution our customers would choose. And we were proving wrong by almost all of the participants on the user research. And this led us to build the application tunnel. You will ask, but what was the problem you are trying to solve? Since Atlassian is focusing on cloud, we care about ensuring that our customers can migrate to cloud as efficiently as possible. We have many customers who have Atlassian products behind the firewall, and many of them because of the security reasons. So to help with those migrations, and allow communication between our products, we needed to ensure that those integrations were secure. As the first step, we needed to validate if the existing way of integrations was secure enough, or do we really have a problem that we need to solve? After validating the problem, we searched for workarounds and alternatives. And finally, we did a couple of spikes, and then we needed to decide how our customers could securely connect their on-prem and SaaS products in order to help them through the migration journey. So let's take a closer look of the usage problems. The first step of the process is the decision. And our decision has a significant impact of how we gather insights about users. It informs what information we collect, what users we talk to, what research method we use, and what stakeholders we involve. For example, if you step into the interview to understand your user better, you might spend 20 minutes on who they are and only 10 minutes on the experience with the product. Then, if we take this information back and figure out what features to build, you will not know. Also, your decision will differ based on the stage of the development you are in. So in the wonder phase, you want to identify the problem you want to solve and who you're solving it for. In the design, you're making a decision about the constraints and the components of the solution. In develop phase, the decisions are about execution. So how to sequence development, when to launch, etc. And finally, in the deploy phase, the decisions are made after you launch. So evaluating the performance of your solution or how to iterate and improve it. After we have defined the solution, we move to the evidence step. And this is where we choose the hypothesis we want to validate. So what evidence will increase the confidence into the decision we want to make? And finally, you reach the actual validation step in which we execute the user research. So there are many different methods you could use for user research, like usability testing, survey, A/B testing, or interviews. And today I will talk more about the user interviews. So user interviews are great for problem identification, understanding, and prioritization. And they're also good for solution ideation, design, and validation. While planning your interviews, a great place to start is determine which type of interview you will give: a structured, unstructured, or semi-structured. Structured interviews have questions predefined, and all participants are asked the exact same questions. They are easy to compare, but a little bit more challenging to develop, and might seem a little bit unpersonalized. The unstructured interviews, on the other hand, have questions that arise spontaneously and in free-flowing format. Every interviewee is asked a different question, and those interviews are casual and personalized, but really harder to compare. The semi-structured interviews is a mix of the two of both types. So we have some predetermined and some spontaneous questions. With this method, you get an objective comparison and spontaneous exploration, but they are a little bit less accurate and harder to defend. Depending on the proficiency or the phase of the projects, you can go with particular type of interviews. For example, the semi-structured ones would work better in a wandering phase. And if you're not sure, the semi-structured will provide you the best of both worlds. But let's dig a little bit more into the structured interviews that we did for our problem. So the first step is to plan your actual interviews. And that what you need to be sure that you have a defined goal or a decision. So you know exactly why you want to conduct those interviews and what you're going to get out of them. Then you need to decide who to interview. So in our example, we reached out to customers who had flagged the secure integration problem. And also we took some of the customers that may have the same problem in the future. Then it's time to actually design the interview questions. So the question should help you with the decision you want to make. So in our case, we prepared a script that we followed during all of the interviews. It's also really good practice to bring your colleague. So one or two people that can help you during the interviews. For example, someone to take notes or someone more technical to answer some of the questions. Defines the role for every person we have during the interview before the actual interview starts. And in our case, we had a designer, an architect, and a PM. Okay, but you'll ask, this is great, but how do I actually reach out to customers? So it's important what you can do to achieve that. So one of the ways that you could do that potentially is recruit participants while they are using your product and service. So for example, you could integrate a single question into the flow of your product, like, do you have X minutes to talk about X, and for example, we'll exchange for $10 or something like that. This strategy works best for high traffic sites when you can turn the survey on for a few minutes and get responses right away. And then you can kind of ask for a phone number or maybe like a link to an actual scheduling of the interviews. A second way of doing this is ask your customer-facing team. So any kind of team like sales, support, account managers. You can ask them to schedule an interview every time, for example, a customer calls to cancel their subscription or have a question about the feature X or request some kind of customization. In Atlassian, we have many customer-facing teams, and we have a constant communication between them and the R&D teams. So we use those teams as well when we were finding our participants. And then one of the last examples of how to find actual customers is using the customer advisory board or beta programs. So a customer advisory board or a CAB is a group of key customers that the company invites to a meeting and possibly additional periodic meetings as well to offer feedback on the product, but also of the overall impression of the company. So you could use those meetings also for sparring ideas of having the actual interviews with them. This works really well for hard to reach customers or small markets. The risk is that you will design your product for a really small subset of the customer and not for the actually broad market. On average, you only really need to talk to about 4 to 6 people per audience before you are likely to start hearing redundant responses. You can learn more through a few quality interviews than many poorly planned ones. In our case, we did 8 interviews to ensure that we collect all of the information we needed, but even after the 5th one, we already saw a repetitive pattern. Now that you are prepared, when the actual interview starts, it's good to build rapport. So make space for introduction, clarify the roles of the people in the room, quickly introduce the research you're doing and why you want to speak with them. Make some small talk like, where they are based or what is the weather. Prioritize open-ended questions. So for each evidence you need, think about what specific questions you might ask participants to uncover the insights you're seeking. So this is kind of actually related to the whole script of the interview. Also, avoid leading questions. Embrace the power of how and why, and also be okay with silence. And I know this can be really hard. And finally, ask for permission before recording. And also ask for consent, not just at the beginning, but also on the end of the interview, just to make sure that you have all of the information needed and the interview is agree with that. You successfully conduct your interview, so it's time to summarize your finding. One of the things that is a good practice is to debrief after every interview. So this can help you by having 3 different outcomes. So you potentially don't do anything. That means that the process is going well and you still need to do more interviews. Or you potentially could stop the interviews because you see that you already have all of the material that you need. Or you might need to adjust the process because maybe the questions are not as good as you thought, or maybe like the participants need to change a little bit. But when you're finished with all of the interviews, you need to analyze what you learned. So there you can create some kind of a mind map, or maybe just put them in a spreadsheet to be able to compare the different answers that you got from all of your interview. Of course, you need to summarize what you learned and how this will help you make your decision. So you need to kind of see, like, did you get all of the evidence you need, or maybe you learned something that will change completely what you thought in the beginning. A good practice for summarizing is, like in Atlassian, we use a TLDR, that means too long didn't read, at the beginning of almost every conference page, which holds the page essential information. The reason why we're doing that is that we use conference really heavily, and not everyone has the time to go through all of the page. So the TLDR on the beginning is always a good practice. And lastly, share what you learned. So many times to make your decision, you need to get buy-in from your stakeholders. You don't want just to dump data on the audience and expect them to figure it out. Instead, it will help if you told them why you are showing them the data, what they should expect to see, and then they will prompt to find what they need to find. So remember, if you build something for your user, make sure that you validate it before you put too much effort and energy into it. So that was it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the presentation. You have put a lot of effort on the interviews. We have some questions here. We can go directly on the questions. Again, if you have any questions, you can go on the link. We also shared the link on chat here, and also you can vote the questions. So let me just share my screen and show the questions here. Can you verify that you can see my screen? I guess you can. Okay.
Yes, we can.
Let me refresh it to get the latest votes. So we will start with the first one, which says, how much evidence do you collect in order to help you validate your decisions?
So as I said, it depends on, it really depends on how you structure your interviews. Like it's more about, like I said, if it's really good prepared, so you have all of the questions that you actually need in order to make a decision or like to get the insights you want from the interviews, it's usually about 4 to 8 people or even to 6 people that you can interview to get the evidence you need. But sometimes it differs when you have multiple different groups of people that you need to interview, so different kind of users or different type of personas. So then you're just going to need to have the same amount, but per the group that you are interviewing.
So what you're saying is that if I understand correctly, if you have, for example, 3 personas, so you need 4 to 6 people per persona to get enough evidence, right?
Of course, it always depends on what you're trying to build. Like what is the problem you're trying to solve here? Is it something that is common for all of the people? Is it something that is only for the specific cohort of users that you are targeting? It's also good to think about it from the perspective, like what is the impact of your solution or problem that you are solving, right? So is that just always only the direct users that be affected? There's also people that might be a little bit outside of your target group that may have or will be affected by your solution. So it's good to kind of keep that in mind and make sure that when you're selecting your customers or users that you want to interview, you're taking also people for a little bit outside of your direct cycle.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for that. Let's go to the next question. Just let me take this one. Do you have interviews with individuals or group of users? And how do you decide which is better?
It depends again what you're trying to get from that, right? So for example, it is different in the B2B and different in the B2C. In the B2C, it's usually better to have an interview per user when you actually want to get something for a user, because if you have a group of users, they might have some influence on what are their answers because of other people in the room, right? But like in a more like a B2B perspective, when you have customers and companies who are like, admins, or like in our case are usually admins. So this is fine to get a couple of those admins together because they have really intense understanding and sense of what they need or what they want, and they don't try to they don't have the tendency of overvoting themselves, let's say like that. So it really again depends on what you actually want to get from those users. If you have a group of users, that's might be more like a study group rather than the actual user interview.
Okay, and the admins that you mentioned are from the same company or from a different company?
Per company is of course per company. If you will mix people from different backgrounds together, it will be really hard to get the actual perspective of everyone, right? So you try to get what they think, and if as much as possible, rather than just influence someone that is more like an alpha person in the room and taking voice more than the rest of them, right? So it's better to have them separated, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you for that. Let's go on the next question. So how much time do you spend preparing for an interview? And if it's a single person task or a team task?
So in Atlassian, in general, we work in triads. So the triad is a product manager, engineering manager, and a designer, and or UX, however you want to call the position. And like this is how we usually operate. So it's not a single person task. It's a team task, because it's like every role can help in order to define what the actual questions will look like. And the designer especially is here like for the user interface, really helpful position. So I would say it's good, like if you have you can start something by yourself, but it's good to validate that with the rest of the team that will be actually taking actions on what you're gonna get from the user interviews. And regardless of the time, I think this is also depends on how you work. It can take you a week, but it also might be something really difficult or really intense that you need to plan the actual interviews even like a month or a couple of months before. It also depends on the customers, on the users, how easy it is for you to get them, how is their program, like what is their schedule, how they are wants to be part of the actual interviews. And of course, you need to add to that whenever kind of actions are done before and after the interviews. Like before, if there's ideas that you need to spike, if the things that you want to prototype and use those prototypes to show to users, this is the actual extra time before the interview itself. And then it's also the time to actually summarize and understand the findings in order to get the outcomes of the interviews.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Very interesting. It's a week or even a month. It's enough time. All right. How many people are involved in the interview preparation process? Recap. I think we mentioned that. So you said about the triads, PM, designer, and engineering manager, right?
But it is not like the rule here, right? It's like, for example, in more design phases of your program, sometimes it's just about having user interviews when you want to test a particular UX with them, right? So you want them to just clicking through a solution and give you some feedback. On those kind of meetings, you don't meet everyone. It's maybe just good enough just to have the UX or design person to contact them and just have someone as a supporting role to give notes or just making sure that everything is on time, etc. Right?
Okay, right. So basically, you adjust the people that you want to involve based on what you want to evaluate at every time. That makes sense. All right. So next question. Startups come with limited resources and many ideas to explore. How about live prototyping, closed feedback loops for validation, and quick product adjustments?
Of course, I think validation is the most important part here. I do understand the limited resources. I think we all have been sometimes in our life in the smaller companies. I would also I think the most classic, it's prioritizing. You need to prioritize what you want to validate, what is really important in startup. You cannot test every single idea that comes up to your mind. There are many other ways how you could get more understanding if the idea is even viable or not, right? So that might be even just brainstorming with your with the engineering, or that might be some marketing research, etc. And eventually, when you get what is important for you, because the user interviews, it's time, so it's also money, so it costs. You need to make sure that you are actually validating the thing that it's more important for you to move forward.
Okay. And how do you balance? So from this question, from my understanding is, instead of doing all the interviews, just prototype something very quickly and get feedback. So how do you balance which to choose every time? This is a follow-up question from me. Or you do interviews for everything? That's my question here.
Yeah, it's not that we need to, test everything that we do with users, right? Like how you balance it, I said it depends what are the biggest problems or the biggest decision you need to meet. That like the things that will move your product forward. Like what is the thing that will move the needle regardless to your product, right? It's not about we need to test every single button or we need to test every single form. But maybe it's just about the overall product usability. So maybe you could, combine some of those things together and use that as, one introduce. Or maybe you want to just divide it. If this even makes sense as a product, then yes, this is an important question. If you're asking about the logic or just the importance of existing in a product market, right? But like it's hard for me to say like where is the actually balance between them. Like I would, it also depends on every organization. Like for some organization it's really easy, you don't have the problem to reach out to customers. For others it's harder, so you need to be more ruthless, target what exactly items you really need to validate with them and how often also, right? And also there are other ways of doing that. You don't need to do user interviews every time. You can have just surveys, you can use just NPS score, you can use many different techniques in order to get the validation and the feedback from your customers. I don't know if that answers your question, Jens.
No, it does. Thank you very much. I think I took this question like more time than it should. I don't want to leave the rest out. So, okay, next question. How do you convince or coordinate with other teams in recruiting customers? Essentially, is there a point of contact that they worked hard building the relation?
I guess this is more about those customer-facing teams. I imagine is the question. So you can, in the beginning, I guess you could just try to crash some of the meetings that they already have. So just being, I'm pretty sure you can find someone that will be open enough to allow you just to observe what kind of conversation they may have, and then kind of use this opportunity to eventually, ask the customer, hey, or the user, I would like to spar some ideas with you. Are you open for that? And just use that as an entry point in towards that direction. And maybe you meant something else by that, but it's hard for me to imagine that in the same company people don't want to share the connections. So, but yeah, maybe the person that added this question can give us a bit more context.
Of course. I do have a follow-up. Of course, if you have some follow-up, please do it on the chat. So what I think is that if you have your customer focus group or you have your business that are very close with your customers, and you have your customers, I don't know, they have a high value ticket, for example, and perhaps you're saying, hey, why do you want to speak to our customer? Perhaps you have some limitations there. These are some obstacles that you have to overcome. This is my thinking here.
Maybe, but like sometimes it's even as easy just to go take support tickets. Just go for them. Maybe it can be just a comment on a support ticket. Maybe it can be just actually trying to figure out the pain of the customer through the support, or maybe it's going with the sales if you have a sales team, or maybe it's more about the account managers that already are working with their customers and trying to see if they're open or validating some new ideas, or maybe they have a specific problem and you just need to dig deeper to understand the problem.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll go on the next question here and say, how do you document the interviewed outcomes in a format that can benefit other teams, departments, and more needs than customer validation, customer insights, etc.?
Okay, so as I mentioned, like we use Confluence for everything, literally for everything. We don't have emails. We use Confluence, and our emails are Confluence notifications only. So you can just start with the actual process, like document the process that you're going to go through, document the questions if you're going with a structured, semi-structured interviews. If you're doing recordings, adjust also the recordings after every interview so anyone can access them. And then kind of the outcomes themselves, it's about like collecting all this information. For that, I think everyone can use whatever tool they prefer. It can be just a table with summarizing every answer you got from every interview. It can be some kind of a mirror board with all of the notes there and trying to find like categories on similar things that you could somehow categorize and get some kind of themes or patterns that you see through all of the different interviews. It's like, and then when you have all of that, it's all about actually putting them on a page and be able to share and kind of define why you did the interviews, like from the beginning, and what you get from the interviews, and did you were able to answer and get exactly the reason why you were doing them in the beginning, right? So this can be like, we were trying, like in our case, we are actually, in the beginning, we are really sure that our customers don't need a new tool for us, a new solution. And we were like so confident, like we had like, all of the different solutions as well spiked before we even went to the interviews. And through the interviews, we're like, having this presentation prepared with different potential solutions. And, just we're asking like, okay, like which one you like, why you like this one, why not the other one, etc. So, and after like, having also the presentation and collecting all of the information and the recordings, then you kind of say, okay, that's an interesting, they don't want this, they want us to build the expensive one. So, we need to kind of focus on that. And this kind of helps us also to drive the actual building of the solution and building a whole team that was responsible for that. And currently is one of the solution itself is currently in the beta phase, so there are beta customers that are using that. So you need to, this is why it's important, because how you're going to summarize what you find and how you're going to show the user or the customer impact of that, this will also help you with getting buy-in for higher leadership. So if you need resources, if you need to show that, hey, I'm working on this problem, but I found this problem and this is more important, I need to be able to tell a story and show the evidence that this is really why we should do that instead of something else, for example.
Exactly. I have two very small follow-up questions here. So first question is, you said that you have recordings, you said that you have Confluence. Do you also have transcripts of the recordings or just?
Zoom provides that automatically, but for non-English speaker, that is usually not good.
Yeah.
I have seen myself like reading something, I was like, what? So yeah, it's I think recordings are good enough, but also like meeting notes, right? So this is like even if you have recordings, they're not always your go-to, because not everyone will allow you to have a recording, especially some companies have a really strict policy of that. So just keeping notes, someone keeping notes that are kind of showing the importance of the overall will help you eventually to summarize the whole interview research, the whole user research.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And what about the leadership? You mentioned about the leadership and how you want to actually pitch ideas or present them. It's like you get all this content and you use it in a presentation. It's not like that they just go randomly on the page, right? It's how you use the content.
Yeah, it's again, it depends on the level, right? So like it depends on the structure of the organization, like how many product managers, who is actually making decision. Like if you are trying to approve something that is completely different, you might want to spike some completely new solution or something that hasn't been done before. And it also depends on, do you really need like the sign off of the leadership or not, or is it do you need resources? What is exactly that you need from the stake for the leadership? And this is also will drive how you will actually present it, right? So user research is one of the data you can use for that, but there are also many other ways to actually making your point, like actually analytics or any kind of data information that you may start in your company. So there are many other like sources that you could use to kind of make up the evidence you need, but it also depends on the context and what actually you're trying to achieve.
All right, thank you for that. Let me mark it as answered. So next question, do you use a guideline or best practice to decide when to use structured interviews, when unstructured, and when the mixed? And the mixed just it means semi-structured.
So the structured ones are good, but when you exactly know, you already have an idea, you already have something that you want to spar with customers. So for example, you have different solutions and you need to prioritize them. So you kind of know exactly what you want to get from your customer. It's not it's easier to build the structured interview on top of that. The unstructured interviews are more like you are in a wonder, you are wondering about a problem X, like, do we need, I don't know, something that is really, so it's still really early in your process that you just want to have those conversations and see how your customers or users are feeling about this idea. It's not that you don't have yet a really standard solution that you want to spike. It's more they want to validate. It's more about a more generic and more harder to define thing. It also can be used when you want just to dig deeper into one precise problem that the customer has. So you know that, for example, someone has a X bug and it is this bug, but maybe it's about how they use the product. So it's not that you exactly know in front what exactly you need to ask them. It's more, it will just come up as you're going to talk with them. And the same structure is as I said, it's mainly like a mix of both of them. So you may have like most of your question structure and leave a couple of them in a more generic way, just to get more sense of your user and customer.
I have just a small follow-up question. I don't know if I missed it in the presentation. How much time is each interview, more or less, on average?
I think usually again, like a 30 minutes interviews for structured one, I think it's good enough. Like, but if you have for user interviews, if you want to do a little bit more exploring like particular solutions, maybe they need to click through pages, etc. This maybe require an hour or so. Like you don't want to extend it more than an hour because I think this will be hard for someone to focus. But I would say like between like 30 to an hour max.
And I guess the more time that you need, the more incentives that you have to provide.
Exactly, and it's also it is hard work, right? It's not that we're just sitting on your normal Zoom meeting, but you need to make sure that you are not showing any emotions. You are not, trying to lead them into what you want to think, and you need to be aware of that. So sometimes after like 2 or 3 interviews, we're like, okay, no, I need a break, right?
Okay, let's go on the last question here we have. Could you share a bit about the product organization of Atlassian? What is the structure and what it's like to work there as a PM? That's very interesting.
Okay, product organizations. So we, as I said, like in general, we work in triads. So this is how it's defined, like in mostly of the teams that are in the R&D. The product org is quite big. I think we are more than 500 currently PMs in Atlassian. So it also depends on which part of the product, on which part of the organization you are in, like exactly what you are responsible for. The interesting part is that product managers in Atlassian are not responsible for creating tickets. We do not create Jira tickets. I haven't created one in 2 years. So this is more on the engineering side. So the engineering side is responsible for making sure that the tracking of the progress and the sprints and all of that is happening. PM is responsible for why and when, rather. So it's more focused about planning, understanding the problem, validating the problem, helping, of course, in any potential problems that have the teams. And the higher you go in the leadership of the broader areas you are responsible for, sometimes you might work with multiple different teams. I have worked in Atlassian with 5 different teams. I was the only product manager. So that kind of immediately changed the way what kind of information you could adjust, right? So you need to kind of be working on a more higher level rather than understanding, strategy, risk, dependencies, roadmaps, rather than actually focusing on precisely small things. But that doesn't way everywhere. Like there are mostly junior PMs are more like a product owner role, so they're more closer to the actual team and the backlog itself. But the more you grow, the connection with that is lower, right? So you don't have that as much. On top of that, regardless to how it's work as a product manager, Atlassian in general are really different company from many other companies that I have worked with before. So it lives by its values. We have like precise values, and we are assessed through those values, and we use those values with anything that we do today. So this is, I think, really nice. This means that it's really open company, so we can find any kind of information we want on the conference page, starting from what was the revenue of the company towards like any kind of other policies you want. Even our founders are making an announcement or blog post on conference, basically to share things on what's happening. The other part that I really like is that people are really open, so you can Slack anyone you need, regardless of if you have met him or not, and just, hey, I have this problem, can we meet? And they're always open to that. So I think this really, really helped. Also the customers, because of how many customers we have and how many different teams that work with the customers, it's also easy to actually, if you want to get on a call with the customer, you're going to get a call of the customer. It's not hard, it's just up to you to do it. Of course, it also has this difficulty because of the scale. In an organization that has more than 8K people, sometimes it's hard to find the people that you need to talk with. But yeah, this is, I think, a couple of the things. And like now we're going to get a product craft in May. That will be all of the product managers for 2 days. And like it's still, unfortunately, will not be in person because there used to be like an offsite somewhere. But this year they're going to use a VR, so they're going to send everyone Oculus VR, just so everyone will be able to join. So that will be fun. Let's see.
That's very nice. Can I join too? I have my.
Sure.
I'll be a spectator. That's okay from me. Nice. It's awesome to see. Yeah, sorry.
We also have like a lot of training budget. So it's hard for me to say how much it's in euro, but I think it's more than 3k euro per year, and you can spend it on whatever you like. For example, I'm using WeForge currently as one of the training tools. We also use kind of how to call it, a growth kind of programs when you could actually understand what is required for the next level, and you work with your manager on a quarterly basis to see how you can actually go wherever you want to go.
Right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for everything, Kamila, for today. I think that were all our questions. Thank you. It was a very nice presentation. I enjoyed very much, and about the interviews. I know we've talked a lot in the past, but that was much clearer now and with all the questions. So yeah, thank you very much for today. I will just have a few closing remarks on our side. You can also find us, as I said in the beginning, on our webpage and on our groups, on our LinkedIn and Meetup. You, of course, feel free to send us a message about anything that you're interested in. For example, if you want to speak on on our future webinar, or you have some ideas, or you just want to ask something or to reach out, please do. We also have our Gmail and our mailing list. So go ahead, we are here, and stay tuned for the next events. And again, Kamila, thank you very much for today. Have a nice evening to everyone. Thank you very much. Bye.